Hi, I'm Kevin Rutherford. Welcome to RG's Talent Tips. Today I'm going to show you how to influence executives with an organizational design exercise. So let's dive right in. First, what exactly is organizational design? Well, it's a step-by-step methodology which identifies areas of workflow, processes, metrics and rewards, structures and systems, and aligns them to fit current business strategies and goals. The process focuses on improving both the technical and people side of the business. Once complete, we now have an organization that is designed to execute on strategy. So why is organizational design and structure important to the success of an organization? Well, good organizational structure and design helps improve communication, increases productivity, and inspires innovation. Basically, it creates an environment where people can work effectively. In fact, most productivity and performance issues can be attributed to poor organizational design. You may recognize some of the side effects of a poor organizational design. Things like confusion within roles, a lack of coordination among functions, and even failure to share ideas. You see, a company can have a clear mission, talented people, and great leaders, and still not perform well because of poor organizational design. So what I'm going to show you today and share with you is an exercise that we do with executives and line leaders to get everyone to understand how OD impacts strategic outcomes. So let's go to the blackboard. So I'm going to move this over here and quickly bring it up to speed. And what you see here is a 6-step process that we typically do with executives when we get to that part on OD. If you remember an earlier video that we shot on the 8 C's, what were some of the workforce implications of strategies? One of those things was what we called connection. And connection really talked about how is the organization designed? What's the workflow, the processes, the systems, the structures required to be successful no matter which direction the organization goes. So this is a quick little exercise to help executives wrap their head around it. And that's the idea. So I'm going to walk you through these, and then I'm going to show you the exercise that we do right after we walk through this step process. So you can see here the first thing that we want to look at is what we call bureaucracy. How formal is the organization versus how informal? And when we think about that, does the organization have things like very well-defined roles? Do they have rules and procedures for every activity? And do they have like a strict division of labor? Meaning, is it real clear about what this function does or what that function does? The more formal you are, right, the more formal you are, you have a higher bureaucracy. The less formal you are, lower bureaucracy. The next thing that we look at is what we call centralization versus decentralization. This speaks to the whole idea of where does power reside in the organization? Does it reside centrally, meaning at the home office or more with the corporate function? Or does the organization give it, on the other end of the spectrum, complete control to the field or to outside part of the organization, down lower? They make the decisions where the action happens. The third area that we look at is what we call staff qualifications. Are we looking at a very highly technical organization or an unskilled organization? And by that, I mean we want to look at, is it required for specialized training that someone has, maybe advanced degrees? It could be specializations like, let's say I'm an IT person, we want people to have Microsoft certifications or something to that effect. We're looking very specifically here at qualifications. The next thing we want to look at is what we call span of control. And in span of control, we look at detailed work versus routine type of work. In the way that the organization works, and this is in general, do we say that there is a high number of direct employees to a manager, or is there a low number? Typically, when you have a very detailed and narrow workforce or scope of work, what you see is one manager and maybe 2 or 3 direct reports. That is very much a higher or detailed work span of control. As we go down lower and you have more routine work, you can have 5, 10, 15, even 20, which you'll see oftentimes in plants or maybe in retail store operations, lots of routine work that, again, lots of direct reports. The next area that we look at, and this is really important too, because we talk about communication. Is the communication that you have inside the organization more formal, or is it infrequent and less formal? And here what you're saying is, if I have a organization that is very technically aligned, maybe I'm going to have much more frequent one-on-one type of communication with them, or I might look and say I'm going to have more email or direct communication that goes out versus face-to-face communication. So it's, again, is it very, very formal, meaning here, or is it going to be very infrequent and more formal? Then we look at the last piece, which we talk about, what is the interrelationships inside of the organization? Here we're talking, is it more fixed and traditional work design, or here is it a very dynamic and fluid, what we call new economy? And this really talks about the organizational structure, its stability, and its form. Are we free-flowing, or are we more rigid and structured? So these 6 areas are typically what we try and get executives to wrap their head around when we're talking about what is the workforce that is required, and specifically when we talk about structure and systems and design, these 6 areas do a really good job of communicating that. Now, how do we take this from the piece of paper so that the executives are not going, okay, that's HR gobbledygook, tell me exactly what we need to do. So what I want to show you here then is we use this exact example here with executives. We take that same information and take it away, and now what I want to do is to create a scale. And here you see the dotted line drawn across the middle, and typically we'll put like a 0 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is above the line and this is below the line. So as we think about an organization and how bureaucratic they are, do they have very well-defined roles? Well, if they have very well-defined roles, they're going to be above the line. If they have less defined roles and not very clear communications around how work is structured, it's going to be on the bottom side. So when we go to executives, we say, as we think about our organization today, we're going to look at 2 things. What does our organization look like today? And then we're going to discuss what does it need to look like in the future. So specifically, we come in here and we go, okay, let's use the same color. And if this is the organization today, where would you say we are? Well, we have fairly well-defined roles, and that's, let's say, at a level 2. Next, we look at bureaucracy and say, are we more centralized or are we more decentralized? Well, you know what? Corporate makes most of the decisions, so we're going to come up here and we're going to say we're probably at a 4. And then we'll look at next and we'll say, now let's look here at the specialization, the type of education our workforce needs. Do we need advanced degrees, or don't have advanced degrees? Well, actually, today where we are is we're kind of like right here. We're at like a 1. We have a mix of unskilled and skilled labor. And then in the future, and again here we look next at how does the work look? Is it put together in terms of span of control? Do managers have a lot of direct reports, or do they have a few number of direct reports? And today we're going to say managers have a greater number of direct reports, so it's below the line. Then we come next to communication and we say, is that communication that we have today more formal, or is it less formal? If it's more formal, this is going to be things like we're going to communicate by email and things of that nature, and not necessarily face-to-face. So I'm going to go down here and say that this is, today, we're much more, we'll say like a 1 here. We're a little bit, we do more email, we don't do a whole lot of face-to-face. And then lastly, are we more traditional, or are we more in that fluid, new dynamic capability? Well, today I'm going to say we're more traditional. So if I'm the organization, then now I say, okay, this is where we are today. Let's plot that exercise here. And now I can see very clearly this is what we look like today. Now this is where the magic happens, because now what you want is you want executives to say, what do we need to be like in the future given the strategic changes or initiatives that we're going to be having in the future? So if this is where we are today, where do we need to be in the future? So let's change colors here, and I'm going to go with a different color. Let's go with purple. So purple or pink. Okay, so we're going to come down here and we say, now where are we? Do we want to be as bureaucratic as we are now, or do we want to be less bureaucratic? Meaning that in this particular position, do we want less well-defined roles, less structure? And we're going to say, you know what? Yeah, we actually do. So we're going to move from a 2 to like a 0. Whoops, to a 0. And so here I'm at a 0, meaning I'm kind of a balance in between. Now if we look at, do we want to be more centralized, which would be above this line, or do we want to be less centralized? And they're going to say, you know, actually we want to give more control to the organization, to the leaders down in the field. So let's move this down from a 4, which we were, to a 1. Okay, now we're looking at technical education, and we're saying, in the future, is the workforce going to have a higher skill set or a lower skill set? And in this case, we're saying, you know what? We're really bumping up the knowledge that is required based on that skill set. So now that number is actually up here. We're going to move it up to a 3, from a 1 to a 3. And then we start to look at the type of work when we say, here is it the span of control. Do managers need to have less number, greater number of reports, or a fewer number of greater reports? Well, what we know is when you have more technical people, you need to have smaller numbers of reports. So they say, you know what? We're probably going to move that number somewhere up in here to about a 3.5 to 4, meaning we want to have more frequent communication that is more detailed around face-to-face discussions. As we look over here, we say face-to-face discussions. It's probably going to be right here, more narrow and detailed, more face-to-face discussions, and more frequent communication. And then here, because we're being much more nimble, we're going to be down here at this level. So now I can come back and say, this is where we are, this is where we want to be. So now let's plot that difference. So we can see here that there's some pretty big gaps between where we are and where we want to be. And quite honestly, you heard me say earlier that poor organizational design is what can trip an organization up really quickly. So if I take this again here, and I'm just going to give you a different color and say, if we start mapping the gaps between these areas, very clearly executives can see what has to be different. And it gives you also, there's another tool that we use in the process that gives them an idea of the magnitude of change. Because, you know, we usually say there's a tweak, there's a transition, and there's a transformation. Anytime we're talking about a difference of 3, that's pretty much a transformation. So you can see we've got a couple areas here where we've made a big transformation is going to be required, some transitions, but nonetheless, this is not going to be an easy shift. And it's not because the plans aren't good, it's because the talent that we have and the structures, the systems, the rewards, the metrics, all of those things that we have in place are not sufficient for where we want to go. So this very quickly makes the executives, you will not believe the number of times I see executives go, wow, or aha, I had no idea. This is a very clear way to take that HR speak and put it in a situation where they can look at visually and go, that makes a difference to me, I get it. So, as you can see, in addition to a clear mission, talented people and great leaders, an organization must also have clear organizational design. Having these pieces developed and in place creates an environment where talent can effectively and create a solid foundation for organizational success. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something that you can apply right away. If you did and want more, please subscribe to our channel below and check out our website for even more content, handouts, and free tools that will take you from where you are to where you want to be. Until next time.